When you mentioned that, I recall our earlier conversations wherein, it all began with just finding a handful of people with whom you can share similar culture. But look at now how it has expanded. There are already 7,000 plus people associated with you in this endeavor.
I think that TV does, even if studies say that TV doesn't support your language, but I've seen that it does
Yeah,
as well.
it does. It does.
So
It totally
I think
depends
that
on how you use it. But of course, conversational, any language is can be learned the best way if it is conversational. And if you do not have that flexibility to interact with people around you, I think maybe, TV serves the best purpose. How do you ensure as a parent that you kind of encourage them to have this problem solving attitude in them?
in terms of like practical things that I think I have applied as well is to discuss. I mean, I don't have all the answers either. I mean,
Right.
but we sort of like, whatever they have questions and they've learned something, we take that home and often discuss it. Like, they don't always remember whatever happened during the school.
Yes. What is your experience with the Finnish education system?
One big difference is that there's much more choices that you have to make as a parent here in Luxembourg, whereas in Finland, there's basically no choices until you go to the high school. But what is really big difference throughout the whole primary school that after each lesson, the Finnish school kids go outside. It's mandatory.
Yeah.
You have a 15-minute break after every lesson, and you have to go outside, no matter what the weather is.
Hi Irene, welcome to the Expat Parenting Show. So happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Ruchi.
How are you doing?
Thank you very well. Enjoying the sunshine of early February days. So this is really enjoyable.
Looking forward to the spring season now.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. So I'll quickly jump on to the questions that I have for you today, and I'm really excited to know this aspect because you're the first parent in this particular podcast series that I'm interviewing. And I'm more so excited because we are going to touch upon the aspect of Finnish education system and you as a person in terms of the qualities that you're going to bring of the aspect of community, the importance of a community and networking, and all these aspects. I'm really looking forward to asking questions from my end. Are you excited?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
What is your experience with the Finnish education system, and how do you think it differs from the Luxembourgish schools in general?
Yes, so I think that this was also something that I was a little bit dreading when my kids were growing up, like, how is the school going to be? And of course, one big difference is that there's much more choices that you have to make as a parent here in Luxembourg, whereas in Finland, there's basically no choices until you go to the high school. And until then, most parents actually choose a local school. And the first actually school only starts at the age of 7. So
Right.
you only have to fill in the form like, yes, we're going to the local school. And then no, most children go that path until they're 15 years old. So it felt very overwhelming that I had to start thinking about the schools already when my first child was 2.5 years old. And it felt really like a major burden because in Luxembourg, it also involves so many a choice of languages and a choice of logistics, choice of finances as well. So, and in Finland, all education is free of charge. And basically there's basically a handful of private schools in the whole country. So it's very, very typical to choose the local school path and in general. But so my children went to the local school during the preschool years. And I think that it was a great experience. I mean, I do really enjoy it. And it was, I think, quite similar to the same age activities in Finland, even if it's not called school in Finland, it's called just kindergarten.
Okay,
so
yeah.
It's very similar, but in Luxembourg, it's much more structured. It has sort of like a minor educational objectives, which makes it so that even your scissor cutting is being evaluated.
The fine motor skills.
Yes, exactly. So it in that sense is much more structured. But I think that the difference maybe then comes when the primary school starts, and also already a little bit even before that, because the school days in Luxembourg are so much longer. So I mean, even when the primary school starts in Finland, we're talking about 3-4 hour school days every day, and school never starts at 8 until you're like 13 years old. You're
Yes,
basically
this,
considered already like, you will be tired and it's okay.
yeah.
So that's a big, like a practical difference. And the other one is that I think in Finland, both preschool and also primary school, there's much more emphasis on the outdoor play. So I
Hmm.
mean the play and creative activities still continue throughout the primary school. But what is really big difference throughout the whole primary school, that after each lesson, the Finnish school kids go outside. It's mandatory. You
Yeah.
have a 15-minute break after every lesson, and you have to go outside, no matter what the weather is.
You went through the same?
Yes, 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 yeah, yes, yes. So whatever, I mean, I think -25 was the point when we did not have to go outside.
Okay.
And then I think +30, but that never happens during a school year anyway. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we're free from that risk in Finland. But basically, and so, I mean, there's a saying in Finland, I think across all the Nordics, that there's no such thing as bad weather. There's just bad clothing, right? It's
Yeah.
inadequate the clothing that you have to take into consideration. So during the kindergarten years, there is like this whole country consensus on wearing these overall, like
Yeah.
waterproof overalls, and in the winter overalls, and really thick gloves, hats,
Hmm.
everything. And even when the kids are smaller, it's mandatory that at least twice 30 minutes
Wow.
outdoor play every single day. So that's I think is a big difference, and of course it gives a bit of a break for the brain, and
Right.
lets you get a little bit of steam out as well. So all the kids go sort of at least supposed to go back to school, back to the next class, more focused and with
Yeah.
spirits.
It's great that you mentioned this, because when I was researching and reading about the Finnish education system, I encountered pretty much the same points, wherein you mentioned that you have a mandatory break after every 30 minutes or 45 minutes.
Every 45 minutes, yes.
Every 45 minutes, you have a 15-minute break wherein children are encouraged to go outside. And
Yes.
also the fact that, irrespective, whatever is the weather, you have to go. So you have rightly put it, that there's
Yes.
no such thing as bad weather, it's just bad clothing.
It would be a difficult cultural aspect to take here, considering that people come from so many different
Yes,
cultures as well. And I think that it's fine. It's understandable if you come from countries where the temperatures stay among certain range most of the time.
yes,
I
yes.
remember like the first baby activities I did with my firstborn. Um, After the discussions, we had made some introductions. We'd been discussing some maybe baby nutrition or something, some other topic. And after that, it was November.
Hmm.
So like this massive group of like South American mothers attacked me like, you're from Finland?
Yeah,
How do you dress a baby in the
yeah.
wintertime? Like, but coming back to the actual education
Hmm.
difference, I think that the big difference, based on what I hear, and this specifically based compared to the Luxembourgish primary school,
Hmm.
and based on what I've heard, because my kids then went to the international school. But I
Yeah,
think that there's much more about learning by heart in the Luxembourgish system, whereas I
yes,
think even the exams in Finland, in the Finnish education system, are mostly designed so that the question is already posed in the way
right.
that there are multiple answers. You have to be able to
Ah,
apply your learning.
yes.
Whereas here, I mean, it's almost dreading the thing that there's only one answer,
Yeah,
and you have
yeah,
to get even the grammar correct. So it's sounded to me a very hard way of learning, coming from the culture
yeah.
that I represent.
In fact, this is the similar kind of education system that we had in India as well, back then when I was growing up. So it emphasized more on rote learning and
Mm,
learning by heart. So
mm.
which was difficult, and I imagine, and hopefully, like now, with years have gone by, and I see the next generation coming up. At least I see some evolution in terms of the teaching methodology and the education system. The pedagogy is kind of changing a little bit. But of
Mhm.
course, there is a long way to go in terms of making that change from rote learning to the practical learning aspect in terms of knowledge gaining, wherein the child feels confident of whatever they have learned throughout their education.
Absolutely. And I think that, I mean, that's what like, it felt like a burden to me as a parent as well. How
Yeah.
can I support my child in this kind of system? because I'm not that structured and
Yeah.
I didn't learn like that. So I think that my parenting methodology is much more based on like, let's discuss this and see where things end up. And because of
Hmm.
there's a clear causality on things as well. Um, but yeah, so it's just, I think everybody will learn eventually the same things, and
Hmm.
it's just a matter of taking a different road into the
Right.
same
Absolutely.
goal. Yeah.
So I'll move to the next question that I had for you. In fact, you have answered it partially in a way wherein you mentioned about the parenting approach. But now that you have experienced the Finnish education system yourself, you've, let's say, born and raised there, gone through that entire system, and your children are now studying in the Luxembourgish schooling system. What do you consider as, the strength of the Finnish education system that really stood out for you when you see it in comparison to that of your kids?
Yes, I think that's what we were just discussing. I think that the creative thinking and
Hmm.
to the learning to find solutions. I mean, I think that's something that, like, Finnish education system kind of, I feel that it encourages you to be bit of a multi-potentialite, in the sense that
Right.
kind of like you can master various things and combine the things, and also that even if you don't know an exact answer, you have a set of assets to
Yeah.
find a solution, and you can come up and combine your knowledge and still kind of feel that you have understood what the topic is about. So I think that's something that I value as a strength, because I think that this then connects to a lot of the skills that we have to also master as adults. You have to,
Right.
there's not only one answer, there's
Yes.
multiple answers, and you have to use your ability, your knowledge, your skill sets, and all that you have to find a solution when you encounter some impossible or near impossible situations, or even whatever little obstacles. You have to be able to find solutions, and I think that the education system encourages more for that. um,
Hmm.
well, I can't really compare. I mean, my kids
Yes.
haven't gone through the whole system yet, but I think
Yes.
and that they're also going to the international school, but I find that that is definitely a strength in the Finnish system.
That indeed is, because yeah, problem solving is a critical aspect even when you talk about jobs. Employers rate it as one of the top skills when it comes to looking for any particular candidate suitable for a particular job profile.
Yes.
So, like, and this kind of brings me and makes me think, like, how do you? This is a slight a tangential question to what you already answered right now. Is like, in a day-to-day, let's say, scenario, how do you kind of make sure if your kid comes up to you and asks that, "Mom, I'm struggling with this or that." How do you ensure as a parent that you kind of encourage them to have this problem-solving attitude in them? Can you recall of any particular incidents when it happened?
Well, I think that, I mean, in terms of like practical things that I think I have applied as well, is to discuss. I mean, I don't have all the answers either. I mean, my
Right.
kids have also come from home from school, and they have said like, "Oh, Mom, I learned about this." They first came like, "I've learned about Harriet Tubman. Isn't that inspiring?" And I was like, "Wait a minute, who's Harriet Tubman?" But I mean, I think that but we sort of like, whatever they have questions and they've learned something, we take that home and often discuss it, like, they
Mm-hmm.
don't always remember whatever happened during the school
Yes.
day, but I think that and also something to go draw back a connection to the Finnish kind of mentality of things is that to discuss that with your child and kind of like
Yeah.
to find like, questions like, how did you feel about that, and what was inspiring, or let's go and search for more information about this.
Mm-hmm.
If they find some interesting topic, then we very often we go to search for more information on Wikipedia, we watch a YouTube video about the topic, or we find some other ways of learning, or we try to find another book at home that would explain something more about that. So I think to find new information and
Yes.
keep up that curiosity, but also to build connections. And also, I think what I do a lot is to also facilitate for my children to find the connections between things
Wow.
as far as I can, so that we come back to like, hey, remember we're reading a book, and it's like, hey, do you remember when we learned about this or that? And do you see the connection? And I
Yeah.
think they also find it quite inspirational. So
That's really nice. I mean, I really liked one aspect of your answer, wherein actually you mentioned that, okay, there are things which you really do not know yourself as a parent, and there's no harm in actually using tools like Google, Wikipedia, YouTube, etc., to kind of let yourself also know what the thing is
Yes. Yeah, yeah,
and
yes.
further educate your kid about that.
Yes, absolutely. And it's I think it's fine, and because I mean it basically also shows them that there's ways to find for more information. So now that my kids might come up to me saying like, "Hey, mom, can you check more information about this on Wikipedia?" Or they
Right.
already my younger son was asking me the other night, we were discussing having very deep discussions before going to bed, and he asked me like, so what is the size of earth, or like how small is the earth compared to sun or something like this, and I was like, oh no, I can't remember, so let's check
Let's
online.
check it
I was
out.
like,
Yeah.
well, when I grow up, I want to know these kind of things without checking my phone.
Yeah. I remember having similar discussions with my son as well, because he was also one day was like, you know how far sun is from the earth
Yes,
and the size of different planets, and I'm like, I know for sure this planet is the biggest planet and this is the smallest planet, but I cannot tell you the sequence in which all of them are placed currently in the solar
yes,
system.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great to know that, probably because our kids are of the same age, so they are going through similar, let's say, a learning cycle as well.
Yes, and I think that I mean mine are 7 and 9, and yours is 8. I think that they are also in the age when they are very curious about the world.
Yes,
Like, learning is still fine and okay, and it's fun, and it's encouraging and inspiring, and there's so many things they sort of. I think that there's an inspirational view, like, wow, there's so many things around this world that can be learned
yes,
that I don't know yet, and I think that they find it very inspiring at this stage. I don't know if it's going to change, maybe or maybe not. We
yeah.
don't know. We shall see.
But yeah, I definitely, at times I wonder when I am stuck in my personal work life as well, or stuck in my life in general. I feel like, why don't I have the curiosity of that of my kid? Why can't I, use my mind the same way as probably I might have used when I was a kid? And that's something maybe as adults or as parents is something that we ourselves also need to buckle up and
Yes,
learn from our kids.
yes. I think it's growing. Raising a child is as much as growing
Yes,
up
as a
self in
parent.
some sense. It goes hand in hand.
Absolutely, absolutely. So my next, in the next segment of this podcast, Irene, I'd like to touch upon the aspect of community building and networking and how important it is in raising a child. So we all know that it takes a village to raise a child, and any parent who has struggled to find a babysitter or has been late to go to school to pick their kids, they would truly relate to it and understand where this is coming from. But building a community is not that easy. And I've seen you in the last couple of years as someone who has kind of done that, not just for yourself, but provided an extension to your family and to your kids as well. So I would like to ask that to you, that how is building a community crucial for expat families? And can you share your own journey of finding a community here in Luxembourg? How did you do that?
Yeah. Thank you, Rochi. Yeah, I think that, I mean, I was, to be very honest, I mean, I knew only a handful of Finnish people when I became a mother here in Luxembourg. I had lived here for nearly 5 years at
Mhm.
the time. But it was just, I mean, I was part of the international community, and then I kind of found that that was really nice place to be. And I didn't see a specific need to get in touch with the other Finnish people until I became a mother, realizing like, wait a minute, I'm now alone because my husband is Dutch. So
Yeah.
I'm alone here now with my Finnish language and Finnish roots and my culture heritage that I'd actually like to share with my child. Like,
Mhm.
I want to speak my own mother tongue to my
Yes.
child. And I knew that my husband wanted to speak Dutch. So, I mean, how will I keep it up? And I realized that as well, he's going to need some buddies.
Yeah.
And for him to have buddies, I need to have some buddies. Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, basically, I mean, it's something that's, yeah, I mean, I would have maybe before becoming a mother, I might have even sort of somewhat avoided some community activities. But then I realized that I will need to find some community for myself and for my child, because
Yeah.
it may become really important for him as well. So, I mean, I started to look for other parents with similar age children, and there was a little Facebook group and some small activities. I mean, the Finnish community is not massive in Luxembourg, right? Especially if
Yeah.
we're talking about finding mothers with specific age children.
Yes.
Go and
Coming
find
from a specific country.
yes, exactly. Find Finns in a financial sector. Yes, you can find a big group, but like, to start specifying is a bit different.
Yeah.
And I think to learn the stories of other parents and the way they saw the environment around us made me also realize how much we actually have in common, even if we would come from whatever different backgrounds. And realizing how, especially something like motherhood, that is quite intuitive, and there's a lot of much more cultural bias that you would think before actually getting that child.
Right.
And you start realizing how comforting it was sometimes to speak with someone who came from the same background with similar expectations about what should be found around you and what kind of activities you'd like to do with the kids, or whatever, like how to convey your culture with your child. So I think that it started from there, but then while learning the stories of the mothers, I also realized that we were all also professionally in a very similar situation. So basically, many of us had found maybe some job or not a job at all yet, but we
Yeah.
were quite, we were very professional, we were
Yes.
ambitious, we had great education, we had already an existing professional experience, but not a job that would match all that.
Right.
So I think that, I mean, it started with very simple and modest ambitions to find buddies for my child, but it turned out to be actually the first activity that I really started doing was establishing a career networking group for Finnish women in Luxembourg, because I realized that there was actually a lot to share. And I also, the funny thing, during these activities, I've met a PhD in chemistry. And then I found another one. I was like, did you know about each other? Like, wouldn't
Yeah.
that be pretty cool that if there's two PhDs in chemistry, I can't imagine how many there would be.
Yes.
So shouldn't you be talking to one
Each
another?
other.
You
Yeah.
know, and the same thing with different other backgrounds as well. So I thought like maybe this would be a good way to, that could benefit myself as well, because I was in the similar situation at that moment. I still wanted to was still looking for that thing professionally for myself. And I think that it was quite interesting, and the events created quite a lot of inspiration. And finally, I mean, I didn't do that many events finally, but it was really great way. And actually, quite a few jobs were found through that network amongst the people
Each
who
other.
that.
Yeah.
So it was actually quite inspiring in that sense, because we also saw that there was something coming out of it, and it
Yeah.
felt fairly empowering. Um, I mean, that's also led into other more global initiatives in the long run. That's for example, Finnish Women Worldwide. That is currently an online community of over 7,000 women, Finnish women
Wow.
around the world in over 100 countries. And we've been doing basically a little bit similar activities online, but also a couple of times in person across the borders, and also including not only the professional development, but also raising multilingual children, also a very topic that is
Yes,
quite dear to
indeed.
us in Luxembourg. So
That's
it's
there in my episode list to do.
all right. Yes, 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 absolutely. Yeah. But I think that I mean, all in all, these community events started to grow quite strongly in me, and I also learned that the value of sharing experiences and with even strangers, and but the strangers that had the shared interests, right?
Yes.
We had some similarity to hold on to, even if we had never met,
Yes.
and it was quite interesting, and it was a very empowering experience in many ways. Yeah.
That's incredible. While you were mentioning that there were some similarities, I was imagining it as that there was a common purpose for
Yes.
each one of you to kind of come together and not just form a community for yourself and provide extended to your kids as well, but again, just empower yourself as an individual so that once you are in a better space of mind, the same you can extend it to your family as well.
Yes, and I found that there was something really meaningful about
Yeah.
kind of activities, because those were topics that, I mean, I cared about, but I realized that I was not the only one. But
Yes.
doing something to share the same questions and, you know, even think about, even if not providing specifically the answers, but at least to think about those questions together, made us realize that we're not alone. And
Yes.
that's actually quite a powerful feeling, to realize that we're all sharing the similar obstacles. But if you're not alone,
Yes. We are
it
not
feels
sailing in the,
better.
we are all sailing in the same boat.
Yes, exactly. And if,
Yeah.
you know, for some of these events that I've been organizing across the years, I mean, then I get an external speaker to discuss some topics. But while I'm, you know, it starts from my personal interest, but I
Mhm.
realize that this can be really important to so many others. And there's
Others.
something really meaningful about that, is about doing something that is meaningful for yourself, but also to others.
Yeah.
Then it creates a lot of you know, feeling of purpose in many ways. So I think that it's become much broader concept, and to me also personally, but also realizing that it's not just about me, it's about, you know, the community
Yeah.
around.
And when you mentioned that, I recall our earlier conversations wherein, it all began with just finding a handful of people with whom you can share similar culture. But look at now how it has expanded. There are already 7,000 plus people associated with you in this endeavor, and it's absolutely mind blowing to me. So
Yeah, yeah.
congratulations for that.
Thank you very much. Because I mean, it was really like a gradual thing as well. First realizing like it's just here in Luxembourg, and then
Yes.
when I started to do the professional network, I soon realized this is not just about Luxembourg; it's about any expat women.
Yeah.
And then talking about the other aspects as well, not about the regarding family and the languages and cross multilingual, multicultural communication and your own self development. Also, among all of this.
Yeah.
Um, it was a global phenomenon basically to any expatriate women, that I'm talking about the Finnish community here because I did that. But then I
Yes.
was based because of this role. I mean, I was not the only founder. We were four ladies who had never met in person, by the way, and we
Wow.
built a whole community. But then when I was in the role of one of the founders of Finnish Women Worldwide, I was
Mhm.
invited to some podcast or some virtual event to discuss with other women expats around the world who
Mhm.
are talking the same language.
Yes.
You know, it doesn't matter where you are. There's
Where
something
you are.
about
Yeah.
the expatriateship, and that you are sort of being faced certain questions and topics that quite universal, to be
Yeah.
honest.
And that to me was one of the trigger points why I wanted to start this initiative of this podcast, because as you rightly put, no matter where you come from,
Yes.
which country you belong to, there are a few common elements which all of us struggle with as expat parents.
Yeah.
And that's the objective
Yes.
with this podcast, to discuss each topic one after the other with guests like you. I'm so happy to have you again, and I'm really enjoying this conversation. We have discussed this aspect of building a community and how it helped you develop your personality and grow your network. But how do you see that this community building has helped shape the personality of your children and brought them a sense of belongingness?
Yeah, I think that it's definitely something that for one, they've learned that, you know, mommy goes to talk to Finnish people. So wherever we are traveling, they're always like, Mom, there's some Finnish people over there.
Yeah,
Maybe you should go talk to them. And then they do that a couple of times when we arrive at the Finnish Helsinki airport. And then they realize, like, well, you know, now
that's home
it's
country.
different. Now stop. But of course, I mean, it's the also we've been involved in the Finnish school of Luxembourg,
Mhm.
which is more like a very informal. It's not really, it's very informal education. It's rather group play, hanging out with other same language children. So this only starts from the age 3. That's why we didn't do, that's why I started to
Okay.
search for these activities when the babies were actually born. Um, so I think that's so they have been definitely kind of seeing that it's quite fun to be around. There's a sort of like a group of trusted adults that they can
Hmm.
go to. They can speak their mother tongue. They don't have to think about which language to pick next. And
Correct.
it's also sort of like, you know, within the community itself, it becomes like your neighborhood. Even if these families come from around Luxembourg, we get
Hmm.
together, then it's like your closest neighborhood. If you imagine
Yeah.
that be a group of houses that would be sort of in a closed circle. Like that's how it sort of feels, that we're sort of like, we know all each other enough to go into talk to about anything to them. The children speak, the parents speak, and any child can come and approach me and ask something like, where can I find this? What to do with that? And I think it's a nice feeling that you don't get that much here in Luxembourg
Mm-hmm.
otherwise, because we don't have the extended family that
Yes,
we would be going in our
true.
home countries to. So I think it serves as a bit of an extended urban family as that. But for one thing as well, I mean, I think that's the whole kind of like also me being involved in all these different communities, and the boys seeing like, that's, there's many, there's a broad network and everything. They're very courageous to go and approach even strange people and go to talk to them. And if they feed, even if it would be not only a Finnish person, but someone else, they're very happy to go and talk to other people. And I think they start conversations, and even supermarkets, airports, wherever. So they're um, quite easy approachable in that sense. And I believe that's somewhat to do with all the different community activities and the broad networks in that sense.
That's really incredible. Again, it brought an anecdote to me, which I was reading, and this sentence really stuck with me, that our need to connect with people is as fundamental as food and water,
Mm, yes.
which, like, we ignore it, we do not realize it. But I'm sure when the pandemic struck, each
Mm,
one of us felt the need to see people, to meet them, to talk them in person, rather than doing all those virtual connections, or talking over video calls or phone calls.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's also, it's for the children to also be heard, and somehow like, to be noticed, and they're, even if they're tinier, they're still
Yes.
part of all that's surrounding them just as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, my next question to you, again, it's on the line of community building only, because we were discussing this and the importance of community in raising a family. Is not everyone is that comfortable in building a community. Not everyone is a pro networker. Not everyone likes to interact with people. They're a little bit shy, reluctant. So, for parents who are hesitant to do that and find it really challenging, uh, what advice would you like to give to them so that they can take the necessary first steps?
Yeah, sure. I think, so I mean, I know I fully understand that, not everybody just starts building
Yeah.
communities like that. But I think that to search for the shared interests, whatever means and matters to you, I think that to follow the topics that really are dear to you,
Mhm.
finding that in whatever form, like, it can be as a group related to your parenthood or for your children, or something about professional. I think that
Yeah.
in any case, it doesn't really matter where you feel that connection, because the community is a lot about the connection, and
Right.
to find that connection, the best basis is the shared interests. And I
Shared
think
it.
that to if you don't feel like, being very proactive, you can just, even casually search for that. You can find a lot online, and that can be very powerful too.
Yes.
um, but then if you do want to meet in person, and you have, that inspiration, and if you don't find what you're looking for, then just do it. Like, you just need two persons first, your
Yeah.
friends who promise to be there to
Yes.
support you, and then you just put it out there and see what happens.
Yeah.
What Nothing can go wrong.
Absolutely.
If no one comes, then you'll be there with your two friends, and you'll discuss, the topics that you care
Yeah.
about or whatever. But I mean, I think that when I launched the first career network group, I didn't know if anyone will show up. And of course, I mean, I was taking up some
Yes.
registrations, and
Yes.
30 people showed up. I thought it was amazing. That was the first time I ever sort of published something that was going to people that I didn't know about. But it was such a powerful feeling. Like, just, I mean, I don't feel like I need power. I just mean,
Yes.
it was really empowering to see that, hey, this matters to some other people too. And to just get together, it doesn't have to be very special. If
Yes.
you share the interests, that's already a lot. But I mean, and I know that, also when I was describing earlier about these different activities and all that, just worth noting, it was like maximum 2 hours a week, right?
Ah,
that can make a difference as well. We're not
yes.
talking about like a full blown week of
Yeah, yeah,
different
yeah.
kinds of community activities. So you don't have to put the bar really high. And even I think that even one meetup or one thing a month can be already something. If you find the connection, then
Yes.
that serves the purpose. It's not so much about the quantity, but the quality.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, to everyone, to the audience, Irene has shared some beautiful tips with us. If you are looking to build community, first you have to find a shared interest, and no matter what it is, but something that you feel passionate about, it would become really easier for you to take that first step. And second, it need not be a time specific dedication that you have to devote to. So, the frequency of this meetups or gatherings could be as per as your schedule, your comfort level, and that would be a really good kickstart that you can give to yourself. And with time, and once you start meeting people, I'm sure you'll gain the confidence to hold such networking sessions or do such community gatherings more often. So thanks, Irene, for sharing those tips.
Yeah.
And I will jump to the next aspect of our discussion today, which is going to be more about the cultural connection and the languages. So we already discussed, you already mentioned about the multilingual aspect and multicultural aspect. So my next question to you is about maintaining cultural connections, and language learning is essential for expat children. So why do you think that having a cultural connection, or the ability to speak in your mother tongue is so important for us as parents? What
Mhm.
is your view on that?
Well, I believe that a strong basis for the self-confidence in general is, and especially of those with multilingual children, is to have at least one strong language, something that they
Mm-hmm.
feel very confident in, and also something that they can call later on an emotional language. I mean, you have to be able
Yeah.
to express your emotions and your sort of your what's going on in your head in one language comfortably. And I saw that for my younger child, for example. I mean, there were moments where he was sort of building up several languages at the same time, and
Yeah.
he didn't have one comprehensive language to express himself, and it was very frustrating for him at that stage, because there was not one language that would have stuck out in the way that he would have been able to
Mm-hmm.
express all his complicated thoughts and
Yeah.
ideas
Yeah.
in one language. I mean, luckily that was it was a short period of time, but I think that this is also for the specifically for the
Yes.
long-term perspective. And I think that there's also studies that show case. I mean, multilingualism as such has not been studied as much as bilingualism. Actually, there's much less about multilingualism. You'd think that
Yes.
in Luxembourg there would be a lot, and there are actually some studies also done in Luxembourg.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it really shows that for the children to also learn to read and write in an effective way
Mm-hmm.
means that their mother tongue has to be strong enough. And for my first child, who developed a very strong Finnish, he needed to learn to read in Finnish before he was able to fully acquire the academic language of English from school.
Oh
So I
wow.
think that there's even studies on this, that it's, especially if the mother tongue is very strong, it's almost necessary for them to build the connections, because the connections in their brain is already language specific, even if
Yes.
they don't apply that in practice yet.
And
So I
it
felt
helps them retain knowledge faster and build more neural networks, as you said.
absolutely. And then that's sort of like a core basis on top of which the other language can be
Can
built.
be built,
Yes.
yes.
And I think that that's sort of like, a good, sometimes I've discussed with some other parents as well, if their child is struggling about this. And I've just shared my experience as well, that, sometimes it's about unlocking first the mother
Yeah,
tongue,
mother tongue.
before you can actually go to the next steps. And I think that, and the other thing about the multilingualism is that you have to take patience. There's no one way of doing things or one speed of acquiring
Yes.
things. It takes sometimes quite a lot of time. And also I think that while the kids are sort of struggling, like juggling, not struggling, but juggling between the different languages,
Mm-hmm.
they can master it. It's quite easy to, like, well, not
Yes.
quite easy, but it's manageable when it's only a spoken language.
Yeah.
But it becomes very difficult, and it takes so much more headspace to then start to learn read and write.
Yes.
And then you have to kind of be patient, and even if they forget a little bit of the other languages, just let go. If we are privileged in Luxembourg, and I think that every child knows at least 2 or 3 languages
Yes.
at the age they start primary school. There's no harm on, putting one language aside for a little while and then, going back to it after a couple of years when the other languages are becoming more fluent. But I think that it's also, I mean, for me to speak mother tongue is also important because I want to share all the different nuances. And, it's that there are nuances, especially in the adult communication. There's nuances that the children would not necessarily understand because it's not. But on the other hand, they feel that there's a nuance, but they can't put a finger on it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the children, I mean, there's so much more beyond the words for the children, especially the multilingual children, because they are used to be placed in situations where they don't necessarily know all the languages, yet they are already acquiring several languages. They're juggling between so many different, like
Yes,
it's so many
absolutely.
different things. And the way I saw sort of like my kids growing up, it felt like, for me, being raised in a monolingual environment, I had languages in sort of like little boxes in
Yes.
my head. And I like when it was a class for English, then I activated that box and then was working on that box. But for them, they sort of have this massive cloud. That's how I envision it. There's a massive cloud of just lots of words, right?
Yes.
They
And they
say that,
use it on a daily basis.
yes, but it's more like one cloud and
Yes.
they're not forgetting that word. They just take the first word that best applies to that situation. I mean, it's like a massive resource. And I believe that even if when they say that, I think a 2-year-old normally knows 200 words and a 3-year-old knows 2000 words, I believe these kids actually know much more. But on top of that, it's actually spread among 3 to 5 different languages.
Yes.
So the vocabulary per language is not much, but the overall amount of vocabulary that they can manage and understand, and even the little nuances sometimes, is amazing. But I think that it's most important that to use the language that you feel confidence in yourself, because it's also the confidence that you're transmitting to your children.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So with that, like, again, it's a related question because you mentioned your husband is a Dutch. You come from Finland. So I imagine at home you'd be speaking both the languages with your kids.
Yes. And then among the parents, we speak English, but never English to the children directly. Yes.
So, like, again, linked to that, are there any specific strategies which you'd like to share with expat parents, especially who are multilingual, that can make, language learning a fun thing for kids? Because imagine, like, we already discussed this, and you mentioned that kids are already juggling with the cloud, with vocabulary from different languages, from different words, but the ability to express in a particular language is something that maybe they, at this stage, considering that both the kids are less than 10-year old as of now, is not that much. So, are there any tips that you'd like to share?
Sure. I think that the first tip would be that, sort of like stick to one language, because I think it makes things much easier in many ways. And I mean, for us as parents, I mean, it was it was quite clear from the beginning that we speak our own languages, and also for the reason because there's only one way to learn Finnish, right? It's not the easiest language. But yes, so as I mentioned, I mean, we spoke English amongst one another, but we never spoke English directly to the children when they were growing up. So. And we also, another trick that we used was that we made the children understand that my husband does not understand Finnish, which is also true. But also we made them believe that I don't understand any Dutch, even if I did understand. But them thinking that we only speak our own mother tongues, plus the English, meant that the kids needed to make the effort. They had no choice. They had to speak only Dutch with daddy and only Finnish with mommy. And the English remained as a passive language until they started primary school. And then they had the social environment languages, which were not spoken at home, which was first French and then
Luxembourgish,
Yes, but I think that even if it sounds, and so what it meant in practice was that we were doing cross translations amongst us parents.
Each other.
So if I was telling something to the children, then I spoke that in English to my husband, who then said the same, or more or less the same in Dutch. to the
Yeah.
children. So it was a lot of like cross translations, and but I think that this will also make our children pretty good interpreters in
Yeah. I
the but
don't doubt that. Any
yeah.
children who was raised in a Luxembourgish education system, and that's something which I really I admire about the culture is, or the system in general is, each kid is at least exposed to three languages,
Yes, yes, absolutely.
which till now I'm not. So
Yeah. Yes. But so and even if it may sound really complicated and really burdening, but there's a logic. For our children, there was one person, one language.
yeah,
That's it. And that made it really easy for them when they were growing up, because then they knew that they don't have to think too much. I mean, for
yes,
it was always somehow connected to the personality.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
that was, I mean, I think that it somehow is even easier than those parents, for example, that have two languages, one of them,
yes,
for example, being French, which is also the environmental language,
yes,
then makes French really dominant for
yeah,
the children's lives. Whereas we were just, well, I don't know, maybe it was a silly human test to do this. And they were exposed to five languages. But I mean, it was limited to all, but none of them became so dominant that they would have that it would have overrun the others.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it meant that they sort of like, the language skills more or less grew in a similar way.
Similar way for each
But
of
what
them.
was kind of a fun tip that we established later on, in the first years, it was not possible, but
Yeah.
nowadays Netflix has the profiles where you can set the languages per
Yes, the default.
profile.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's something that we started establishing, because we also realized at one point that the Dutch was lagging a little bit behind the
Mm-hmm.
Finnish. So we started establishing TV days. So like, that I mean, yes, we limit the screen time, but I think that TV does, even if studies say that TV doesn't support your language, but I've seen that it does as
Yeah,
well.
it does. It does. It
So
totally
I think that,
depends on how you use it and what kind of environment you provide to the kids. I mean,
yes,
because for my kid as well, I've seen similar thing, like because he's exposed to French in school,
mm,
and that's something neither me nor my husband are speaking. So we wanted him to learn more French, but of course, conversational. Any language is can be learned the best way if it is conversational, and if you do not have that flexibility to interact with people around you, I think maybe TV serves the best purpose. I mean, whatever the kid wants to watch, of course, we keep a timer of the screen time that okay,
yeah,
you watch for this minutes, but at least we also try these days to kind of switch to French, watch a certain part of the video in French, and maybe you can then switch to English or any other language that he may want to. And
yes,
that I've seen, it helps the kids pick
yes.
up vocabulary, which otherwise he may not be able to.
Absolutely. And as a parent, you can even if you show the French for your child, you put the English subtitles on, and you will be able to explain what's going on in your mother
Absolutely.
tongue, and sort of build the connection in a sort of like an observing way
Yeah.
to children. That's how what I've been doing with my kids as well, that even if they're now kind of like, well, they need to also learn the English very well. So I'm explaining them, building the connections between the languages. Even if I'm reading the reading in Finnish to them, then I build the connection. Like I realized that this is a new word for them, and
Yeah.
then I mentioned that in English, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's right." And then
That's
they,
how they connect the
they
dots.
extend the vocabulary grows together. But I think that another aspect is still that even if there's this saying that children are like sponges when it comes to languages.
Yes.
But I have a good friend, Annika Bourgogne, who's also written a book about bilingualism, and she always says that yes, kids are like sponges, but like sponges, they need activity. Sponge does
Yeah.
not work if you don't water it and if you don't
Absolutely.
squeeze it, which means
Yes.
that you need to have, some studies say that I think that you have to have an exposure of 30% of your awakened time to be able to maintain and sort of let the language develop. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, if your kids sit with five languages, it doesn't quite work. There's no
Yeah.
50%. But I think that the key point is that they need to have you need to practice the language as well. And the second learning from her is that by nature the kids are a little bit lazy, so they have to have
Mm.
a good motivation to use that language as well. So whether it's a hobby or a book or their favorite series, which we did actually
Yeah.
with the Dutch when they were lagging a little bit behind. So we established that certain series that they really enjoyed
To be watched
were
in.
only to be shown in Dutch audio.
Yeah.
So that was never watched in Finnish at all. So then that favorite show became that, the motivation was that
Yes.
they had to learn that or listen to that in Dutch. So that was kind of like we're a little bit tweaking, a little bit directing. I think that it's not manipulation as such, it's just giving gentle guidance. Like
Yes.
this is how to keep up with the languages.
But these
But
are really practical and useful tips, Irene. I mean,
yeah,
because initially, even I used to think like that. Okay, I was totally against screen time. I was totally against, devices and things like that. But I realized that okay, in today's time, we really cannot do without them.
mm,
Even if we try to restrict it at home, the school follows a different system where they are exposed to tablets and devices.
yes,
So me not doing that at home would kind of again create a controversy in their mind that why at home I am subjected to a particular way of living, and in school that particular way of living is correct, where
yes,
at home it is incorrect.
yeah.
So
And
yeah, having such strategies really really helps. Sorry, I cut you in between,
no,
but
no, no,
please
it's
go ahead.
okay. And I just wanted to continue on that because there's also different ways, especially when the kids are growing up. It is beneficial for the parent to sit next to them and
Yes.
explain in your own words, your parental words,
Yeah.
how you are used to speaking with your child and explain what's going on and discuss about that, because that's how you create, like, and then it's not, I don't see it as a bad thing. It's something
Yes.
that where you are also, sharing different perspective. You're also, because if it's just you, then
Yes.
it becomes really difficult. And this is also what, just as an example, because the Dutch lag behind, because my husband is the only person that speaks Dutch to my children.
Yeah.
They don't have the exposure of the Dutch extended family
Community.
much. And it means that if they only hear it from one person, it may become a little bit more narrow.
Yeah.
Whereas where you sort of like coming back to the sponge, you have to kind of like water, give water from multiple directions. I mean, of course, they manage fine as well, and they've learned the Dutch even without. But I think that it's good to hear many different people speaking
Yes.
the same language and in different contexts, because people tend to use a little bit different words.
Yeah.
But even if all this being said, I do want to also share what I've seen in my kids is that the kids also need a break sometimes.
Mm.
It is very tiring, even if they seemingly manage very well.
Yeah.
But I've seen the difference when we go to an entire monolingual environment, and we do this by, I mean, a couple of weeks every summer in Finland, just
Hmm.
me and the kids, and then my
Yeah.
husband joins another time. But a couple of weeks in an entire monolingual environment where they don't have to think what language comes next.
Yes.
It is a break for the brain. And you think, do they forget the other languages in the time? They don't.
No.
I've witnessed so many times is that their Dutch comes back stronger, their English comes back stronger after the break, and their Finnish vocabulary has extended. It's a win-win-win situation for
Yes.
the entire language palette, is to have that break every now and then, because it is a lot of processing for the little brains.
Yeah. That's really a great one to put. I would definitely keep that in mind because even I have seen that with my kid as well. When we go to India, we switch to Hindi, and
Mm,
then for that entire duration, he's cut off from Luxembourgish, specifically again French, English, little bit he might be exposed to, but these two languages he's definitely cut off. And we feel like okay, once we go back, he might forget it.
mm,
But it's refreshing to see how the kids they cover up and they are more than excited to see and interact with their friends, have chit chat, so yeah, it's wonderful. So Irene, I would with all these amazing conversations that we have had until now, I would now like to move towards the concluding aspect of this podcast. And with all the discussions we were having, I didn't keep a check of the time where we are. So
no problem.
we flew with the flow, I would
Yes.
say.
And that's
Uh,
important as well, right?
yes, yes. So I, in the conclusion section, what I've kept for you is one question which is specifically on the challenges of an expat parent. So, what do you think? What are some of the challenges that you faced yourself as an expat parent, and how did you overcome them? And what lessons have you learned along the way?
Mm. Well, I mean, for expat parents, I mean, I think it's very evident that we miss that extended family, and it can be really hard, especially if you're both working parents, because
Mm-hmm.
it's there is an amazing amount of things to do. The working hours are, I mean, comparing to the Finnish
Yeah.
culture as well, the working hours tend to be a little bit longer, and especially before COVID, it used to be much more inflexible,
Yes.
which was making it, at least for me, the very early years extremely
Difficult.
exhausting.
Yes.
Yes. And even if it then now you start adding up, you were exhausted and yet you did all these community activities. It doesn't make any sense, does it? Well, there was the point that yes, maybe I was exhausted, but I was also, I needed that
Yeah.
inspiration. And I think that finding these community feels, felt like it's worth it. Um, I mean, I'm quite social myself, and I've
Mhm.
definitely enjoyed the journey, but it did take a lot of effort, and it took a specific lockdown to realize how much effort it had actually taken. But it all made sense because it was still in the end worth it. It was
Mhm.
for a good cause. It was, I mean, for me to feel
Yes.
good and feel connected to many people, but
Yeah.
also for the children and for being a parent. You know, it's important to do all of this. But I think overall, I mean, I would do all it again, no problem. I'm really
Wow.
happy to have found the communities and around myself, but also the family, and I think that it has had many positive impacts. So um, now the kids are already more in their own community activities. I think that, I mean, I don't take such a deep approach to this community business anymore, except for the Finnish Chamber of Commerce in
Yes.
Luxembourg, which I founded. But that's another storyline.
We'll talk
But
about that
yeah,
sometime
but I think that
later for sure.
yeah, but I think the the practical tips to overcome all that is to take some time for yourself,
Mhm.
whenever you can, and fight to take that time.
Yeah.
Go for a forest and remember to breathe really deeply, and I think that that's already helps a lot.
Yes, indeed. I have read so much about that deep breathing. It's so underestimated, like in our daily lives, that we really don't pay attention to. Oh my God, breathing can be such an
I
important part
realized
of
that.
your life.
Yes, I think that I woke up to the fact that I had probably been only like very shallow breathing for the whole 5 years of the first years of my kids being brought up. And well, I realized that I started breathing. I was like, wow, that feels good. Feels like something's really happening. It's really,
Something more alive in you.
yes, absolutely.
Okay,
But
Irene.
long stories kept short. That would be what I would say as an expat parent. But it is worth connecting to people, find that connection, and find some meaningful, topic that you can, source from. Then I think that's good.
Perfect. With that, I come to the last question that I have for you. That reflecting on your personal experience, what role do you believe that exposure to different cultures plays in shaping a child's perspective, and how has it influenced your own parenting philosophy?
Yeah, I think that we can all acknowledge that we're very privileged in Luxembourg in terms of the mix of cultures and
Yes.
languages around us every single day. And I think that the children will be so rich having all these experiences and all the cultures around them. I mean, they grow up in a very different world to my compared to myself,
Yes.
the very monolingual and monocultural
Yes.
culture in Finland where I grew up. But it's, I mean, them growing up to all of this, it inevitably broadens their horizons and the way they see the world. I mean, that they learn that there's not just one way of doing things.
Yes.
And I
Absolutely.
think that is so important. And for me to then encourage that, to ask some questions and like go find some connections and like how do they will learn respect to that everyone's choices are just as right.
Yeah.
And I think that in terms of like, as a maybe conclusion of all of that plus all the community aspects and everything, I think that for me the for the parenting philosophy has evolved, of course, along with all of this that I've been sharing with you today. But I think that the biggest kind of conclusion has been also the sharing and giving basically within the community as well, and how important it is. It can be such little things. And whenever I started to kind of have a little bit more time and at my hands, I
Mhm.
wanted to immediately give it back because I
Yeah.
realized I know what other people may be going through. I mean, it's been
Yes.
really tough years, especially when the kids are very small and you're growing up, you're trying to juggle between that and your career and your work. So I think that this whole concept of like even a very vague concept of urban family it's really important. That can become very important. And I think that I have received some really invaluable help and support myself, and I want to give it back and pay it forward myself as much as I have capacity. So, but I think that it's a very big. It sounds so maybe cliche, but I've seen it in practice, and I think it can make miracles.
Yes, it indeed can make miracles. We are definitely seeing one today. And I think in terms of giving back, again, helping others and giving back to society is something very innate in human beings. Some of us can recognize it, some of us can still not recognize it, but it's just basic human nature.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Irene. It was really, really lovely talking to you. I really enjoyed this an hour long of conversation with you, and gained a lot of insights from your personal experience as a parent, as an expat parent in specific, in terms of the multilingual and multicultural abilities that we need to give to our children, and how it helps them in their future life, in their ability to express themselves, to express their feelings and emotions well, is something that definitely got stuck with me today. So that's my takeaway from the session today. So thank you so much once again, and thank you for taking out time from your schedule for this podcast today.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Ruchi. I really enjoyed the conversation, and it was
I'm
really
glad.
It was a nice reflection for myself as well to start thinking about these questions and kind of see a little bit of the path behind, and see that so many good things have also come along the way. And
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Irene. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.